Today, my guest and tackle myths in the tabletop RPG industry.
Welcome to DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show. Level up your RPG campaigns by filling yourself with stories and knowledge. Explore topics from archaeology to film history to writing to literature and much, much more. This is DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show.
Welcome to the show. My name is Matt, and I am your host. This is the show where we learn how to become better role players and better game masters by filling ourselves with stories and knowledge. If you want to read more about my thoughts on filling yourself with stories, you can head over to DiceGeeks.com. I wrote a blog post about this. It's called Game Masters, Fill Yourself with Stories. And in that blog post, I just talk about how the great storytellers, whether they be filmmakers or novelists or role-playing game designers, have always been great readers, have been great consumers of stories. And so if we want to be a better game master without spending hours and hours of prep time, all we have to do is just fill ourselves with story, read great literature, see great movies, watch great TV shows, fill ourselves with those stories, and then we're able to bring those elements to the table when we run a game. They also make us better players, even if you don't game master that often. Now, my name is Matt Davids. I am the author of the Book of Random Tables, among other tabletop RPG resource books. You can find those at DiceGeeks.com. If you go to Amazon.com and just search for Dice Geeks or the Book of Random Tables, a lot of my books come up. You can also find them on drivethrurpg.com. A lot of the PDF versions are on there, and you can grab those at ridiculously low prices. I mean, ridiculously. Okay, guys, seriously. And all of my products, all of my books are geared to helping game masters cut down their game master prep time, because we just don't have time for that these days. Careers, families, social responsibilities, anything like that. We just don't have time for it. So I make resource books to help cut all of that down to where you can handle it and run more games. Now, in keeping with my theme of this show, while I want to explore topics like history, archaeology, filmmaking, literature, writing, I also want to bring you tabletop RPG designers as well as folks who work in the industry. And my interview today is somebody who works in the heart of the tabletop RPG industry. So here is the interview. My guest today is the co-owner and managing director of Pelgrane Press, Kat Tobin. Kat, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
It's my pleasure. Let's just start off. How were you introduced to tabletop role-playing games?
So I got into tabletop RPGs in college. I had never heard of anything to do with the tabletop industry at all. Like, I had never heard of board games or card games or, and the only board games we had in our house growing up were like Trivial Pursuit and Scrabble. So I knew nothing at all about any of it. And I came to college, and my what became my university game society used to run an introductory event for freshers, which was a variation of Steve Jackson's game Killer. So essentially they called it Assassins, and you would be trying to hunt down and kill somebody. I'm doing air quotes around kill, but obviously you can't see that. But you would have to hunt down and kill somebody while they were trying to hunt down and kill you. And I thought that sounded fantastic. I had never heard of a game like that. And I was like, I want to know more about this. I took the university's Freshers' Night. And at the time, my university game society kind of shared its meeting space with the Society for Creative Anachronism, the SCA. And so I turned up, and the person who was kind of hosting the event said, oh, yeah, you should go over to that corner there and listen to that guy who's about to talk through things. And I was like, okay, great. And I went over, and it was the guy from the SCA, and he talked us through, like, there was a bunch of us freshers there, and he talked us through what the SCA was about and, all the kind of things they did. And I kind of came away from it going, well, that's really interesting. I didn't realize that was a thing, but it's not really, I don't really see how that connects into the games. But I went back again the next night, and the host again was like, oh, you came back? And I was like, yeah, I'm here. And she's like, oh, the SCA people aren't here tonight. And I was like, okay, what are all of those people sitting around those tables doing? She was like, well, they're playing role-playing games. And I was like, well, can I try that? And she was like, sure. I went and she put me on a Star Trek game. So the first game I ever played was Star Trek. And bless him, the GM was not great. And all of the other players were freshers and they were just not into it. But I remember sitting there going, well, I don't think this guy is great and I don't think these people are great. If you had a like really enthusiastic and good GM and you had really enthusiastic and good players, this could be the most amazing thing in the world. And that was, I'm not going to age myself now by telling you how long ago it was. It was many, many years ago now. And I've still never really lost that kind of sense of kind of awe and kind of amazement for what role-playing games can be. I've just, I was literally from that very first session, I was hooked. I was like, this is me. I am home. This is my thing. So, yeah, and I went from that to like gaming 7 nights a week, as you do in college, because I wanted to like consume all the games. I wanted to try everything.
Yeah. Not to date yourself, but what Star Trek game was it?
I think it was the FASA one.
The FASA one? Yeah.
Yeah. It's that kind of 90s-y.
Yeah.
I think that was in the 90s, yeah.
Yeah. Well, 80s, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, not to date anybody. I played FASA Star Trek quite a bit myself.
Yeah, I think that was the one.
Yeah, no, that is fascinating. That would be your first experience. So it's always interesting to me to hear about people who learned about it, like in college or a little later, because the first time I played Dungeons and Dragons when I was 9.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I've had a few people on who said they started gaming in college. And so you just said you went to 7 nights a week. How did your grades do?
That's interesting that you should ask that. I did end up spending 7 years in college to do a 3-year degree. With some kind of, starting my first year, I failed quite a few exams. Yeah, I just spent all my time in the game society, kind of hanging out with the gamers there. And also doing a lot of work for the game society. I was the publicity person for it, and then I went on to be the convention director for our local convention, WarpCon. So I was very involved in the committee and in kind of making things happen for the game society. And so, sorry, I was just going to say, and I justify that now, obviously, because I'm like, well, clearly I was just learning vital, career skills for where I would go on.
Yeah. I was just going to say, so yes, after that much gaming, then it became your career. So that wasn't wasted time.
Exactly. Yeah.
How did tabletops, role-playing games, then actually become your career?
So like I said, I've always been just really in love with role-playing. I think it has such power as a hobby, and it's so versatile. For all that I've been gaming for a long time now, I'm still coming across RPGs that thrill me and excite me and are completely new, and are doing something very new. And that's what I love about it. It's such an innovative hobby. So I've continued to game all the way through. And I co-founded a fully residential convention here in Ireland in the late 90s with 2 other friends. And then I moved to Edinburgh in the UK. And I briefly became an accountant. But while I was there, again, got involved with the Edinburgh Game Society, the Edinburgh University Game Society, got involved in helping them to run their convention. And eventually I was doing a lot of interviews because I wasn't happy with my job. And all of the interviewers would say to me, well, maybe you could do this job. But whatever this weird games thing is, when you talk about that, your eyes light up. So this is really what you should be doing. And I was kind of like, well, I know that, but there are no jobs in this industry. But eventually I made the decision that they were right and that games were ultimately what I wanted to do with my life. So I made the decision to move back from Edinburgh to Ireland. And I said, right, that's it. I'm going to retrain. I'm going to set up a games company. And I'm determined I will starve in a garret for like the next 10 years, but I will work in games. That will be how I earn my living. So I came back to Ireland, and while I was living in Ireland, I started training as a Java programmer to make Android games. And while I was here, I ran a Dragon Meet, which is a convention in London. I got involved in that, and I was heavily involved in it the first year, and then the second year I ran it. And while I was running it, I met Simon Rogers, my now business partner, and he was very interested in running a Pelgrane convention. And And I said, well, I run conventions. That's what I do. So, here's my card. If you ever want to talk about running a convention, I'd be happy to do that for you. And he got back to me about a month later and he said, hey, so can you send me through a CV? So I sent him through kind of an event management CV, kind of listing all of the events that I'd run and all of the work that I'd done in that area. And he replied to me going, do you have any other skills? And I was kind of like, well, I make great coffee. Like, where are you going with this? What is it that I feel like, you're digging for something? What are you looking for? And he said, well, I have this employee, Beth Lewis, and she's just handed in her notice. She's leaving, so her job is going to come open. And he sent me through the job description, and my jaw just dropped. I was like, oh my God, this is my dream job. This is my job in role playing that I never thought existed. And here it is. So I spent literally days tweaking a CV and a cover letter to apply for the job. And part of it was, I did an interview with Simon online, and he said, well, I would need you to be in the office in London. Would you be willing to move over? And I said, well, I'd be willing to move over, just to kind of get trained up, on the understanding that as soon as you felt I was trained and could do the job, I'd be able to move back to Ireland, because ultimately I want to be near my family at the moment. We had like a lot of applicants for it. But I think the fact that I was willing to move, kind of, as well as, my experience, because I'd done a lot of kind of voluntary experience. I'd also worked with a company called Contested Ground Studios, who did A-State in Edinburgh. And I'd spent some time working with them and volunteering for them. So I had kind of some experience of like small company publishing, but nothing on a professional level. Yeah, but got the job and moved to London and lived in London and kind of worked in our London office for a couple of years, and then moved back here to Ireland, and that's where I've been since.
My introduction to Pelgrane Press was actually through the podcast Ken and Robin Talk About Stuff.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, probably in, I think it would be like 2014 or so. So I know at the beginning of the show, I introduced you as co-owner and managing director. Can you just kind of translate that and tell us then what does that mean? I mean,
I think I was saying before we went live, it kind of translates, I think, in North American terms into the CEO. Mm-hmm. So but it's a little bit more than that, because I basically do everything that somebody else isn't doing at Pelgrane. So and what I mean by that is that we've now got Becky Smith in, who's helping us out with customer support, and she's doing a lot of kind of data analysis for us as well, which is great. So she's now doing customer support, but previously that was part of my remit as well. So I do everything from talking to writers, working out what writers are going to write for us, looking at manuscripts that they submitted, developing them with the writers, then taking those manuscripts and sending them for copy editing, sending them to layout, commissioning all of the art for them, writing up all of the art notes, working with the artists to get art in. And then I send it to the printers. I work far too closely with printers, unfortunately. And I work at getting the books from the printers to our mail order distribution points in Nevada in the US and in Devon in the UK, and also to our distributor in Michigan, who kind of sends them all out to the game stores. And then I do things like this. I kind of try and talk to the media, and I try and do bits and pieces of marketing to make people more aware of Pelgrane and what we're doing. And yeah, and that's kind of basically, I'm pretty much dog's body at large, and I do everything that needs to be done for the company, essentially.
And I'm just wondering, since you're in the position you are now, I'm sure you see a lot of things, like a lot of people talking about the RPG industry, the tabletop RPG industry. Maybe could you just tell us, what are a few myths about the industry that you hear sometimes that people talk about?
Gosh, I don't know. I think so. I think one of the biggest myths is that, I think a lot of people, and I include myself in this, really aspire to be in the RPG industry. So many people would love to work in the RPG industry, but primarily people want to be either rock stars, they want to write or design, right? Because they're the only people that are ever seen in our industry. They're the only people that, I see a lot of people like tweeting at Ken and at Robin saying, oh, you know what you should do? You should publish this thing, or you should do this publishing related idea, or, here's a thing you should do with your books. And kind of none of that, I don't think people often realize that none of that is up to Ken and Robin or to the designers. A lot of that is, there's a whole level of invisible grunt work, I guess, that goes on behind the scenes that people in similar positions to me are doing, that is invisible, and that just, pops out books at the other end. And then kind of, I see Ken and Robin at Gen Con, and everyone, is coming up to them and going, yay, you're so great. Thank you so much for writing this. And there's kind of, and then I'm kind of anonymously behind the counter, kind of just, ringing people up or whatever. So it's kind of, it's interesting to me that people kind of forget the levels of work that are happening in the industry. So, like similarly, layout people have one of the toughest jobs really in the industry, and nobody knows anything about layout people. There are some artists who are kind of famous, but copy editors as well. Like the work that those people are doing is just, we wouldn't be able to publish books without it, and none of them get any credit at all. Nobody's ever come up to our booth at Gen Con and gone, oh my gosh, I really want to talk to the editor of this book because they did an amazing job. It's just, it's just not a thing. So I think that's, I guess it's less a myth and more a perception of who's doing the work, and the kind of the invisible work that's happening behind the scenes. I think another myth as well is the size of the industry. Certainly this is something that I've experienced a lot with Pelgrane. A lot of people think of us as this kind of big, almost corporation, like a big faceless corporation, when really it's predominantly like me sitting in my house frantically trying to keep plates spinning. It's, there's that kind of, and there's that perception with a lot of RPG companies. Like we don't have a marketing team. We don't have a project manager. We don't have a finance team. We don't have anything like that. Like I pay all our invoices, all of these kind of things that most standard companies would have. People in the RPG industry don't have, because all of the companies are so small that everyone is multitasking. Everyone has multiple different hats that they're wearing. And I think that often that means that people have expectations of particularly RPG companies that we're just not capable of delivering because of the size, because of the amount of bandwidth that we have. It's just, I think there's a mismatch there in terms of what we could do versus what we are doing.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think I know at least some years back that was kind of my perception as well, that it was just like, well, these have to be huge companies. These have to be, big things. And they're doing all these wonderful things and they're putting out all these books. And then you find out, it's 2 people or 3 people or something like that.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And outside of somebody like WotC and Paizo, I mean, that's true. And maybe Fantasy Flight as well. That's true for everyone in the RPG industry. Like all of these companies, there are no more than half a dozen people working at them. So we're all doing, like I said, little bits of everything. But a part of that as well is that, I think that makes it a really supportive industry. I feel like we all kind of really help each other out because we all understand the kind of situation that everyone else is in. We all understand none of us have bandwidth, none of us have financial resources to devote to things. So there's a lot of support, and there's a lot of, giving advice to other people and kind of recommending people to work with other people and all of that. So it's a very friendly industry as well, in a way that I don't know if many people understand.
I guess my previous question kind of leads into this one. What if there's somebody out there who wants to work for Pelgrane Press? What are some mistakes that they would make in thinking, oh, I could get a job at Pelgrane Press? What are some mistakes that they might make if they want to try to write for you or get a job for you?
Actually, that's an excellent point that I didn't quite touch on. Very few people, very, very few people are doing this full time. we're really lucky in that we work very closely with Ken and Robin, who are both full-time RPG writers and designers, although they do both do bits of fiction now and again as well. And Garth Ryder Hanrahan is the same. He's also a full-time RPG writer as well as working on his own novels now. And I do this full-time. But for example, Simon works full-time with his other company. And Becky is working part-time for us. And that's kind of the team, you know. So in terms of getting a job with us, I think unfortunately that's a mistake in itself, because we don't have writing jobs. If that makes sense. We don't have writing and designing jobs, and not many people do. Most writers and designers in the games industry are freelance, so they're working for multiple people. So certainly it is possible to write for us. And we generally, when we're working with newer people, we tend to kind of onboard people by getting them to write something smaller to start off with. So we have like a monthly webzine called See Page XX. We'll often get people to maybe write an article for that. And that will kind of show us how people work to deadline, how capable they are of taking feedback and incorporating it into a draft, how good their writing actually is, how well they can structure an idea, you know, how well they can articulate their thoughts, all of those kind of things. But it's a short and manageable first step, basically. And we then, after that, we would generally give people a smaller RPG writing project. So maybe they might write a convention adventure for us, or if we've got a book, like at the moment, Rob Paints, who is working on icon followers for 13th Age. So we've brought in some people to write little chunks of that. So sometimes we'll be able to parcel up bigger projects and make them into manageable projects for new people. But in terms of mistakes that people make, I think, again, expecting to be given a book straight out the door, probably a big one. Again, that's just not something we would do, because in the past, when we have done that, we've gotten badly burnt by the amount of development work that's subsequently taken. Another mistake that I think people make is sending us through work that they've already written. So generally speaking, we don't publish other people's work unless we've worked with them before. So the way that we tend to operate is that people pitch us ideas. So pitches are very short. They're like maybe a paragraph or two. And we'll then kind of, if that's something that fits in with our existing product line or that fits in with our upcoming production schedule, because we have our 2020 products planned already, and we've got our production schedules probably pushing out into 2021. So we need to kind of make sure that if somebody is working on a project for us, that's something that actually does fit in with all of the other projects that we've got that are in progress at the moment. So I think, those are two big things. Sending through something that they've written already and expecting us to just take that and publish it is one thing. And then expecting to just get a massive assignment straight out of the gate is another one.
Maybe 20 years ago or 15 years ago, I kind of thought that same thing too. It's just like, oh, well, I'll write up this game and I'll just send it out to companies and they'll just say, oh, great. And they'll publish it. And I will just sit back and collect checks or something.
I wish it was that easy. Oh my gosh, that would be amazing.
Yeah, it would.
No, you're totally right. And that's, I mean, certainly I can't speak for other companies, obviously, but for us here at Pelgrane, I cannot think of a time when we have taken something that somebody else has written up in full and submitted to us and published it. It's just not how we operate. We have our own distinct product lines, and we tend to commission primarily work for those existing product lines. Mm-hmm. I think another thing as well that not a mistake so much that people make, but something that I think a lot of people aren't aware of, is that if we do have a project where we're looking for newer writers, the first place we're going to go to is the people who are posting on our social media. The people we have resources pages for all of our products where we've got free downloads, like free adventures, character sheet, all of that kind of thing. We're going to look to the people who are creating those resources, to the people who are who are excitedly posting their ideas on our social media, we've got a Gumshoe RPG community on Facebook. We've got our own Twitter accounts and that kind of thing. And we see that. We see who the excitable fans are. And those are the people that we're most likely to reach out to if we do ever have space, or we are ever looking for people, we'll kind of reach out to them and to our convention GMs as well, because those are the people that we know are invested in our games. And obviously we don't, we want people who are invested in our games specifically to write for our games. So like I've had a couple of people come up to me and say, hey, I'd like to write for you. So they might come up at say the booth if I'm at a convention or something. And I kind of go, okay, well, great. Well, what Pelgrane games have you run? And they kind of say, oh, I haven't really run any of your games. And I'm like, okay, well, which Pelgrane games have you played? And they say, oh, well, I haven't really played any of your games either. And I'm like, okay, so what do you play? And they're like, oh, I play a lot of Fate. And I'm like, well, then you should go and talk to Evil Hat about writing for them. Because, I only want people who are playing and running my games to write for my games. It's not a kind of it's not, I think people often think that they can just, they don't really see that what we're looking for as publishers are the people who are already on the Pelgrane train, as it were, Like you can't just kind of turn up at the station and be like, can I get on here? It's like, no, you've got to be in from the start kind of thing. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. I'd imagine it's true for a lot of companies in the industry that they are recruiting from within their existing customers and fan base, because those are the most excited and enthusiastic people, and you can train people, hashtag not all people, but you can give people a lot of guidance on how to write, and you can help them become better writers, but you can't teach just a love for your games. That's something that people either have or they don't. And I always think it's very obvious if people don't have that and they're trying to write something, because it comes across as very kind of sterile and cold.
And that makes perfect sense, of course, that that you would want somebody who is invested personally because they have an enjoyment of the thing to write for it. I mean, it just makes perfect sense. Just a little question, just it kind of more general, just about you touched on it a little bit, I think, but just what do you think about the ease of self-publishing these days?
Oh, I think it's fantastic. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. Like I was saying earlier, like it's the novelty and the innovation in the industry is, I think, one of the most exciting and important things about it. I think that it's really important that we're always trying to, try new things and do new things. And we've always been limited in the past by having to produce books of things, back before the internet. Again, I'm dating myself definitely here. But genuinely, back before the internet, like I remember when I worked with Contested Grounds, when they were releasing A State, they had to basically borrow money. So they had to get a loan to publish a massive print run with no concept as to whether or not it was going to work or whether people actually wanted it, whether people would enjoy it. Now, they'd done a lot of work and they'd gone to conventions and they'd kind of built up an audience and built up a community, but it was still a massive financial gamble, and that made people, I think, in role-playing very conservative. People weren't really willing to take risks. They weren't really willing to try new things, because the financial risk was so great. Whereas now that we have like self-publishing, I mean, people can literally, write up a game, put it up on Drive-Thru-RPG or put it up on itch.io and have it published, like self-publish it within literal hours, and have it up there for people to take and people to play and, people to enjoy. And that I feel has really contributed a massive amount to how agile we are as an industry and how easily we can now innovate and try really new things, like really push the envelope on what role-playing can be and what an RPG can be, because there's just so much less of a risk. So I think I'm really excited about kind of what's happening, particularly on itch.io at the moment. Like there's some really, really groundbreaking new games coming up there, and there's a lot of people working in newer formats like one-player games and two-player games. I mean, we've got a couple of two-player games now for our Gumshoe 1-to-1 system. We've got like Cthulhu Confidential and Knights of Black Agent Solo Ops. But considering the demand for two-player games, we as an industry really haven't been delivering that kind of product or creating RPGs for fewer than your standard kind of 4 to 6 player party. And I think it's fantastic. This is exactly what I want to see us doing as an industry with RPGs. And I think it's these people who are like newer designers who are self-publishing, who are just trying new things, trying new genres as well. There's I always think of Kira McGrann's A Cozy Den, which is about like lesbian snakes. I mean, I love that there's a lesbian snakes RPG. It's just, that's exactly what we should be doing. Role playing is a medium for telling stories, and we shouldn't just be telling the same fantasy dungeon crawling and Cthulhu mythos monster fighting stories over and over again. We should be telling stories about lesbian snakes or whatever it is we want to tell about. I'm really excited about how easy it is now for people to self-publish. It's something that I definitely want to I would always encourage people to self-publish first. If they're if people are interested in getting into the industry or are interested in doing writing and design, absolutely start self-publishing your own work so that you're building a portfolio and you're building an audience that you can then take to a bigger publisher if that's the way that you want to go with it. Things like crowdfunding platforms like Kickstarter and Patreon as well have also made it, again, they've taken away a lot of that financial risk that used to be there and made it much easier for publishers. You don't even, if you want to do something more than digital publishing, you can actually, you can crowdfund a print run, and that's fantastic as well. It's really changed. Like I said, it's really changed the nature of kind of how we as an industry are working and what we as an industry are producing.
I couldn't agree more. We are going to get games that wouldn't justify a 20,000 copy print run or something like that. We just wouldn't, we're just going to get so many games. And of course, even in my own experience, just starting kind of in 2014 and 2015, self-publishing my own stuff, starting self-publishing in the evenings and weekends. And then, now I do it full time.
Yeah.
And, it's just unbelievable, just the opportunities that we have that, that we can just, you can just put up a PDF, like you said, just in a few hours, and you'll get feedback instantly, whether people like it or whether people don't, or if it's a good product or whatever. And you really did not have to spend any money if you did not want to.
Exactly.
It's just incredible.
Because, a key part for us as an industry and for us as a games medium is iteration, right? So it's creating a game, creating a thing, and playtesting it, and then developing it based on that playtest feedback and iterating it and making it better, improving it through multiple rounds of playtesting, both kind of internal and also external, by giving it people who have not played it with you, and that's what makes a really great game, is those multiple rounds of development that come from getting, like you said, that critical feedback from other people.
It is interesting because now that I do it, I have had people, pitch me ideas, and I try to be as nice as I can. And I just tell them, it's just like, I'm just one guy in my bedroom, I can't afford to, hire anybody, let alone do any of, let alone read somebody else's stuff. I'm just so busy with everything else. It's just, I think there is something, it's just the perception, once you have a name of a company kind of out there, people just kind of just assume that there's a lot of people working behind the scenes when it's just one person searching through public domain art and things, trying to figure out, trying to upload their own files and getting, hundreds of error messages and then trying to do it again. Also, kind of a thing that goes along with that, I've kind of embarrassed to admit, I have yet to get to play one of Pelgrane Press's games. I've read Trail of Cthulhu. I've bought several and I've read them. And then just recently, I bought Ashen Stars and the supplement book, the Accretion Disc. And because I'm just kind of fascinated with that, I've been wanting to play Gumshoe for a while. And I'm just kind of fascinated with kind of the idea of I have a soft spot for science fiction every once in a while. And so I like the premise of the investigative kind of spaceship. Since I do self-publish, it's just like one of my goals then would be if I start playing Ashen Stars, I would write up some material for it and be able to publish it, because now, we have Creative Commons, we have the open game license. Maybe you can just tell us some of your thoughts about that. Like, now that it's available for third-party publishers to be able to publish, resources that go along with companies' games.
Yeah. So again, I am always very, I would love to give all of our product and all of our intellectual properties away to everyone to do what they want, because like I was saying about the industry, it's a very interactive industry, right? There's no other medium really where the consumers of the medium are also creators of the medium in a way. So the people who are playing our games are literally as responsible for creating them, particularly for GM. They're as responsible for creating the experience at the table as our systems are. We have an SRD for Gumshoe. So anyone who wants to can publish a Gumshoe game using the Gumshoe system. And we've had quite a few people have done this already. So we've got Bubble Gumshoe, for example, from Evil Hat. And we've got, I'm blanking on his name now, which is terrible. But there's a guy working on an M.R. James themed Gumshoe game, which I think is going to be a really great fit for it. So a lot of people have taken the system and are making their own games in it. But it's funny that you talk about the Creative Commons because, or the community content, because we're actually, at the moment, I'm working on laying out a couple of what they call kind of seed PDFs for the Ashen Stars community content program, which we're going to be launching at the end of December. So we're going to make it, it's essentially going to be a Gumshoe community content program, but we're going to be opening up because not all of we don't necessarily have all of the rights for all of the Gumshoe games. For example, Trail of Cthulhu, which you mentioned, we actually licensed from Chaosium. So we don't necessarily have all of the rights to do all of the Gumshoe games, but we're going to start off with Ashen Stars and see how that goes. And certainly I think we'll move on to releasing the Esoterrorists and Fear Itself, which are our two kind of modern day horror games as a community content program games as well. And then we'll kind of look at our other Gumshoe games and see what else we can put up there that would be, because we really want people to, we would love for people to write things for them, but the nature of the world is that I guess you have to be quite protective of your intellectual property, because we would hate for somebody to take one of our IPs and just do something really horribly racist or horribly sexist with it. So we're very careful about what we allow people to do with our properties. So the community content is really attempting to kind of give back to our community. Are fantastic. I say this all the time, but really our Kickstarter backers and our followers on social media are such great people. And I would really love to kind of give back to them what I know that they've already put into our games. So I'm really excited about that, and I think, like you said, it's going to also mean that we can have new content, because like I was talking earlier about the size of the company, our bandwidth is unfortunately very, very limited, and we always have too many amazing ideas and too many shiny new projects that we want to work on, and so we're not always able to maintain product lines for some of our older products like the Esoterrorists and Fear Itself and Ashen Stars as well, in the way that we would like to. Like, we'd love to be able to release multiple products for those every year, but there's only so much we can do, or so much we're capable of producing. So I think that's going to be really great at providing people who are excited about these particular games, about these Gumshoe games, with brand new content and ongoing new content. So I'm very excited about that. I think it's going to be great.
I'll make sure to link up where people can find that in the show notes to this episode at dicegeeks.com. So hopefully here after I finish, I've been running some Dungeons & Dragons 5e, but after I finish that, hopefully I'll be able to run some Ashen Stars for my group, and we will see what happens from there.
That would be great. Yeah, well, encourage them to create their own Ashen Stars content and to get it up there on the community content program. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, I just kind of introduced it to some of the guys in my gaming group just a couple weeks ago, and there were a couple at least who were very interested in it, who hadn't heard about it before, and they were very interested in it, and so they were checking out the books that I bought and that, and so so hopefully I will be able to run something here in a while, but as always, we'll see. I have to take things as they come, but and still always hard to keep a game going sometimes. But
it's always too many ideas and not enough time.
Absolutely. There's just so many. There's just so many games. If somebody's never heard of Pelgrane Press and they want to learn more, where should they go?
So our website is pelgranepress.com, which is PelgranePress.com. And that's got all of the details about all of our games like 13th Age, our D20 fantasy game, Trail of Cthulhu that we already mentioned, which is our kind of 1930s Cthulhu Mythos gumshoe game, Knights Black Agents, which is our kind of modern day spies versus vampires game, and our upcoming The Yellow King role-playing game, which is again going to be a 4-book gumshoe game kind of inspired by the stories of Robert Chambers. So all of that information is available on our website. And we've also got a web store there as well, where you can buy any of the print books that we've produced. And you get the PDF for free as well with the print book from our web store. And you can also buy the PDF separately. But definitely the website, we've got great content on there. We have free downloads, like I said, for all of our products and all of our writers. We have a monthly webzine that people can sign up for. And we publish new articles by our core writers and also by other writers that we think would be interesting to our audience on there every month. So if you sign up for CPage XX, you'll always have the most up-to-date information about where we're at. Oh, and we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook as well, and also Twitter at Pelgrane Press. I should mention that. Okay. So follow us and like us and do all the things.
Absolutely. Everybody should follow on Twitter and like on Facebook and check out the website. So I will provide links to all of those. Like I mentioned, they will be in the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com. So everybody listening can go and check them out. So Kat, I just want to thank you so much for being on the show today. It was a great pleasure to speak with you.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, guys, I really hope you enjoyed that interview with Kat. It was just an absolute pleasure to speak with her today. Now, as I mentioned, I have provided links to Pelgrane Press. Wow, that's a lot of P's. Okay, I have provided links in the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com, and you can check all of those out there. Now, of course, these shows are pre-recorded, so when Kat mentioned the community content creation for Ashen Stars, that is now live. So I have included some information and links about that. When you visit the show notes, you can check that out if you want to create content for Ashen Stars. That is just the place you absolutely need to start. So head over right now to the show notes at dicegeeks.com. You can just look for Kat Tobin in the title for this episode, and you will find the show notes there. Now, hey guys, if you want some free stuff, head over to dicegeeks.com/free. You will get 10 free dungeon maps, plus you will never miss an episode of this show. Also, guys, it would mean the world to me if you would consider supporting the show on Patreon. Every bit of support that I get on Patreon helps me continue to produce fantastic episodes like the one today with Kat. So if you would, please head over to patreon.com/dicegeeks and consider supporting the show. Now I understand if you're not in a position to financially support the show. I totally get that, and I totally understand it. So there are other things that you can do. You can subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app. You can write a review to the show in your favorite podcast app. Those help immensely with the ranking of the show within those apps, and it helps people discover the show. So subscribing and leaving a review of the show would be fantastic as well if you just cannot financially support the show right at this time. I really appreciate all my listeners, and I just want to thank you so much for listening to my show. I will be back next Wednesday with another fantastic guest for you. So until next time, keep gaming.